The marble halls of the Supreme Court are tense this December, echoing with the weight of decisions that could alter the course of American history. It's December 3, 2025, and a storm of legal challenges, each bearing President Trump's unmistakable signature, has converged on the nation's highest court, casting a long shadow over Washington. The outcomes of these cases will define not just the legacy of his presidency, but the daily lives and futures of millions of Americans from every walk of life. The justices are poised to rule on cases that could fundamentally reshape presidential authority and the delicate balance of power between Washington and the states. At stake is the very question of how much power a president can wield without oversight from Congress, and whether the executive branch can act unilaterally in times of crisis. The court must also decide which laws prevail when federal and state rules clash, a question that could redefine the relationship between local and national governments. And looming over it all, what happens to the most vulnerable Americans during a government shutdown, when essential services grind to a halt and uncertainty reigns. The Trump administration asserts a bold, even aggressive vision of executive power, imposing tariffs, withholding benefits, and making sweeping decisions with far-reaching consequences. The White House has sided with corporate giants, insisting the executive branch needs broad discretion to act swiftly in a complex world, especially when economic interests are at stake. But critics warn of dangerous overreach, a disregard for constitutional norms, and the erosion of checks and balances that have defined American democracy for generations. The stage is set for a monumental clash, with the Supreme Court as the final arbiter in a drama that will echo far beyond the marble steps of the courthouse. For businesses, families, and those seeking justice, the stakes are immediate and deeply personal, touching everything from paychecks to civil rights. The coming weeks will reveal not just the fate of Trump's policies, but the character of a nation grappling with deep divisions, searching for answers in the shadow of the High Court. At the center of a major economic battle are tariffs imposed by the Trump administration in 2025. Citing national security and the fentanyl crisis, Trump used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to levy new taxes on imports, bypassing Congress. The administration claims IEEPA gives the president sweeping authority to act swiftly in emergencies, arguing that flexibility is essential in a complex world. But critics, including businesses and legal scholars, say the law was never meant to let the president unilaterally set economic policy. Lower courts have agreed, ruling Trump exceeded his authority in setting up a Supreme Court showdown. During oral arguments, justices appeared skeptical, questioning whether such broad power erases Congress's constitutional role. The court seems wary of sanctioning a major expansion of presidential authority. The administration's gamble may not pay off when the final decision comes. The tariff battle isn't just a matter of legal theory, it's a daily reality, hitting businesses and consumers across the country hard. From the aisles of local stores to the checkout counters of big-box retailers, the impact is being felt everywhere. Retailers like Costco, now facing millions in new taxes, have taken the extraordinary step of suing the Trump administration. They're seeking refunds for tariffs they argue were imposed illegally, and their legal battle is drawing national attention as it could set a precedent for other companies. A looming December 15th liquidation deadline means customs entries soon become final, making refunds nearly impossible even if the court rules in their favor. The clock is ticking, and every day lost could mean millions more at stake. Companies are racing to file claims before time runs out, while the government warns that an adverse ruling could cost hundreds of millions of dollars, potentially impacting federal budgets and future trade policy. For everyday Americans, tariffs translate to higher prices on goods we all rely on: electronics, clothing, and household staples, stretching family budgets and forcing tough choices at the register. Critics call tariffs a regressive tax, arguing they hit low- and middle-income households the hardest. For many, these added costs mean less money for essentials, and growing frustration with policies that seem out of their control. The legal fight is also a fight over the cost of living, with families and businesses alike watching closely to see how the courts will rule. Imagine a warehouse manager at Costco staring at paperwork for millions in tariffs, knowing that a Supreme Court ruling could save jobs, protect livelihoods, or force painful cuts and layoffs if the decision goes the other way. This is a high-level constitutional argument with real-world consequences, where the stakes are not just legal, but deeply personal for millions of Americans. The court's decision will determine whether businesses recover their losses or are forced to pass them on to families, shaping the economic landscape for years to come. In another legal drama, the Trump administration faces crisis over food stamps after a 38-day government shutdown. In October 2025, the administration announced it would suspend November SNAP benefits, citing lack of congressional funding and the Anti-Deficiency Act. The move sparked panic among millions relying on food assistance, with critics accusing the administration of weaponizing hunger in a budget standoff. Advocacy groups and city governments sued, arguing Congress had already authorized the funds. A federal judge ordered the administration to release SNAP benefits, framing it as a duty to prevent widespread hunger. The administration appealed, prolonging uncertainty for families. The case exposed the devastating human cost of political dysfunction. The SNAP dispute raced to the Supreme Court as the administration sought an emergency stay to block benefit payments. The stakes were high, with millions of Americans relying on these benefits to put food on the table. As the legal battle intensified, uncertainty spread among families and advocacy groups who watched anxiously for any sign of resolution. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson issued a temporary pause, extending the wait for desperate families. Her decision bought the administration time, but also deepened the anxiety for those who depended on SNAP to survive. The pause underscored the gravity of the moment, as the nation's highest court weighed in on a crisis affecting millions. The administration insisted it couldn't pay without explicit congressional appropriation, but courts disagreed, ordering payments to continue. Judges argued that the law's intent was to protect the vulnerable, not leave them stranded during a political standoff. The legal back and forth left agencies scrambling to interpret conflicting directives. Meanwhile, Congress scrambled to end the shutdown and pass a funding bill, creating a race between legislative action and the courts. Lawmakers faced mounting pressure from constituents and advocacy groups as the nation watched to see which branch would act first to restore stability. The White House fought on two fronts, battling in courtrooms and racing against the relentless political clock. Every hour of delay meant more uncertainty for families and more tension in Washington. Critics argued the administration prioritized asserting executive power over resolving the crisis. Editorials and commentators questioned whether the legal fight was worth the cost to ordinary Americans, who bore the brunt of the impasse. The willingness to take the fight to the Supreme Court, rather than work with Congress, was seen as an unnecessary escalation. Some saw it as a test of executive authority, while others viewed it as a failure of leadership and compromise. The standoff became a symbol of government at war with itself, with the vulnerable caught in the crossfire. The images of empty food banks and shuttered offices captured the human cost of political gridlock. The outcome would determine not just policy, but the fate of millions. For families across the country, the decision would shape their futures and test the nation's commitment to its most vulnerable citizens. The third major case before the Supreme Court centers on Roundup weed killer and its key ingredient, glyphosate. Bayer, facing tens of thousands of cancer lawsuits, seeks Supreme Court protection from future liability, arguing that EPA approval should preempt state-level warnings. If the court agrees, most lawsuits against Bayer could be shut down. Bayer claims decades of studies show glyphosate is safe, and that state lawsuits create chaos for federally approved products. Plaintiffs argue Monsanto and Bayer hid cancer risks and manipulated science, making state courts the last line of defense. The case is a fight for corporate accountability and public health. The Supreme Court's ruling could bring regulatory certainty for Bayer, or uphold the right of citizens to seek justice. The stakes are life, death, and the power to hold corporations accountable. In a stunning move, the Trump administration has backed Bayer in the Roundup case. On December 1, 2025, the Justice Department urged the Supreme Court to rule for Bayer, arguing that federal law gives EPA the final say on pesticide labels. This reverses the previous administration's stance, drawing fierce criticism from consumer and environmental groups. Critics accuse the administration of siding with corporations over cancer victims, setting a dangerous precedent. The White House argues a single, federal standard is more efficient for business than a patchwork of state laws. Opponents say this strips away vital consumer protections and weakens states' ability to safeguard public health. With both Bayer and the federal government aligned, plaintiffs face a formidable challenge. The Supreme Court must weigh regulatory consistency against the right to seek justice. The outcome will shape product liability law and the power of citizens for years to come. As 2025 ends, the Supreme Court stands as the final arbiter in conflicts that cut to America's core. Tariffs, SNAP, and Roundup are more than legal disputes. They're referendums on presidential power, government responsibility, and the rights of ordinary people. The justices' decisions will send shockwaves through the economy, social safety net, and public health. At stake, the balance of power in America, and whether checks and balances can withstand a stronger executive. The Trump administration argues for a more powerful presidency. Critics warn of eroding accountability. The court's rulings will set precedents for decades, defining the relationship between government and the governed. As the gavel falls, the nation waits for answers to the fundamental question: who holds the power, and for whose benefit?